Madam, we're going to address on blockchain technology and banking. Just before going to that, I'll brief of a small description on blockchain technology in banking. Blockchain technology is a new technology which is based on mathematical, cryptographic, and economic principles for maintaining the database between various participants without the requirement of any third party or central authority. It is a secured distributed database, tamper evident, wherein the validity of a transactions can be verified by parties in the transaction. The utility of the blockchain is that financial transactions no longer require any central authority and are and are immediately validated, clear, and settled. Blockchain technology appears to be an innovation which promises a major change for the capital market and other financial services. Blockchain is an emerging technology which can be rapidly change the banking and financial sector, providing ample opportunities for growth and innovation, capable of reducing risk and cost. It will bring a major transformation across the banking sector and will make various current systems and processes redundant, a process redundant and obsolete. So, Madam will going to elaborate on on the same topic. Before that, I welcome Professor Charan Raj to welcome Madam.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our person, Vedapada Madam. Madam holds postgraduate degrees in business administration and in commerce. Madam has corporate experience of 5 years, having worked with state, street, global advisors in areas namely bonds, derivatives, performance measurement, market data services, client instructions, money market, and NAV. Madam has 7 years of teaching experience and is currently working as a faculty at St. Joseph College of Commerce, Bangalore. And her areas of expertise are finance, banking, marketing, human resource management, and technology. She has published more than 25 articles in Web of Science, Scopus, UGC Careless journals, and has written more than 5 books. Madam is a certified Elsewhere scientific research journal article writer and advisory board member of Elsewhere Committee and reviewer in many Emerald publications. With this, I extend a warm welcome to you, ma'am. Looking forward to your session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir, for that crisp welcoming and introduction. I'm very grateful to Davangere University and the organizing committee for having me today for the session as a resource person. Thank you so much. And a very warm welcome and good afternoon to one and all participants, dignitaries, and other participants. I'm sure you might have had an exhaustive sessions again and again in different aspects of business applications regarding to artificial intelligence. So I decided not to specify and repeat the concepts again as it would lead to boredom. So instead, I thought let me explain and concentrate in detail on blockchain technology, especially its applications in financial sector in today's session. So I would like to begin with cryptocurrency, and my entire session is divided into two components. So first, I would like to exchange some information with all the participants regarding the concept of blockchain. How did it evolve? A little bit of its history and its architecture, so that we have some idea about it. And the second part of the session consists of a practical case study and how the blockchain has helped it's the process being simplified, especially in terms of banking and financial sector. And there are some real life case studies also. And in between, I will squeeze in a small practical demo of how you can create the blockchain when you are looking for transactions. So I would like to begin with cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is basically a digital currency where it does not involve any paper material, and it's a digital asset which is designed to work as a medium of exchange. So whenever there is a transaction which occurs between the individuals or two different organizations or two different parties, So the transactions can be in terms of money, it can be a document. So any type of transaction when it occurs on a digital platform. So cryptocurrency acts as a medium of exchange between these two parties who are involved, especially which is on a computerized database. There are different types of cryptocurrencies which are currently being used and applied, and the most popular ones are the bitcoins, which is popularly used in the blockchain technology, and some of the other ones are Litecoin, you have Dragon Coin, you have Multicoin, and many more are there. But among these, Bitcoin is the most commonly used one, and it's a popular one as well. Now, what exactly is this Bitcoin? Basically, it's a fusion or a combination of data as well as money. So if you break the word Bitcoin into two parts, you have bit, which represents the data, and the other part as coin, which is the money. So when you combine, it becomes a Bitcoin. So it is one of the types of cryptocurrencies which are currently applied in the blockchain technology. Now, a quick history of how this Bitcoin came into existence, because Bitcoin served as a base or a foundation to the current blockchain technology, which we are talking about in many areas of applications in business. So it is assumed that Satoshi Nakamoto introduced this concept in the year 2008, and there is no proof of his existence. And in the year 2009, this coin was successfully transacted. Basically, a first transaction was executed between Satoshi and a scientist to experiment and to see whether this coin really does what it is used for. And in the year 2010, a French programmer, a computer programmer, he purchased two Papa John's pizzas using Bitcoin worth 60 American dollars. So the cost was $60, and he executed that transaction using a Bitcoin. Now, what exactly is a block? A block represents a small portion in the entire blockchain, which is a part of a database. Now, this is a portion of that particular database where it stores the information as and when the transaction occurs. And every transaction, when it is executed, the information of that particular transaction gets registered firmly on this particular block. And each block has a capacity to n number of transactions in it. Every transaction is treated as a unique transaction with all the information available in the block. Now, the components of block is broadly categorized into two parts. One is the header, and the second is the transaction details. So now let's quickly take a look at what is the content in each block. Now, the header part of the block consists of the detail regarding the block verification number. Now, whenever a block is arranged in the blockchain technology, every block is assigned with a verification number, and it is sequentially and chronologically arranged to form a particular blockchain. So the header of a block consists of its verification number, previous hash of a hash of the previous block. I will tell what exactly is a hash, and timestamp. Timestamp is basically to authenticate a digital transaction in terms of the time and date. And hash can be considered as a special attribute which acts like a digital fingerprint of a digital transaction. So every time there is a digital transaction which occurs, a unique fingerprint is created digitally, and that represents hash. So it's a unique attribute, and it also plays a very important role in connecting the blocks in a blockchain. Next is the nuance. Nuance is a random value which is actually generated, and it varies in the hash output as and when the transaction occurs. And the target represents a predefined rules in the programming. So when there is a programming language created, it has certain rules and regulations, and target represents those rules and regulations. Now, the second part of the block consists of the transaction details. Now, when a transaction is executed, the details of the transactions consist of the sender and the receiver's information. and also the amount which is transferred. So whenever there is a transaction happening through blockchain technology, and when these cryptocurrencies are used, so the number of coins which a particular sender holds will reduce as and when the amount gets transferred to the receiver, and the same number of coins gets added to the receiver. For example, I hold 10 bitcoins. Approximately one bitcoin is worth of 33,000 American dollars. So one bitcoin is equals to 33,000 US dollars. So assume I have 10 bitcoins with me and I have purchased a laptop. Now I need to transfer money to the laptop shopkeeper. So let's say I have to transfer a money worth rupees 30,000. So what I do is I transfer one bitcoin from my account to the receiver's account. So from 10, the number of bitcoins reduces to me by 9, and that one bitcoin gets added on to the receiver's account. So that's the transaction details, which will have the sender's information, that is my information, and the receiver, that is a computer dealer or the owner's information, and the amount, that is the value of the transaction. Now let's move on to what exactly is a blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is a digital record keeping system. And when we talk about different transactions, earlier, if you recollect the previous days, it just began with a physical ledger, and slowly there was a transition with the advancement in the technology. People slowly started moving to Tally, and then it moved on to various accounting and record keeping softwares. And now we have moved a little more advanced way where we are applying blockchain technology. So it's a digital record keeping system of various transactions that is shared among the peers in the entire network of computer system. So in a particular network, if there are 10 users, each user is considered as a node because they're using computer system, and these transactions are shared among those 10 members who act as peers in the network. And this blockchain technology act as a specific type of database on the digital platform. See, the idea behind identifying or using this particular blockchain technology is to ensure a digital timestamp is created on every digital transaction. So whenever there is a digital transaction, there has to be some authentication of its occurrence, and also validation is most important. So these are the two important factors which actually helped in the origin of this particular technology. And also it adds on various other features in terms of security, immutability. You cannot tamper the transactions once you have registered. A transaction is executed, that transaction gets permanently recorded or registered on a particular block. So if you try any changes, it is not, it has to be at a mutual consent. If there are 10 people involved, all the 10 have to agree for the changes, and those changes will not be overwritten on the previous or the incorrect transaction. Instead, there will be a new block created with the changed version of the transaction, so that whenever the user in the network would want to go back and see the history of the entire transaction, can be done with the help of these blocks. Now, what exactly happens whenever the first transaction is initiated? Assume the same example. I am buying a particular device, that's the electronic computer or a laptop from a particular ABC retailer. And that's the first time I'm purchasing a particular product from him. So when I create or execute this particular transaction, the first block is generated in the blockchain, the whole blockchain. And the first block is treated or named as Genesis block. Every first block in the blockchain technology is considered as a Genesis block for the reason it does not have a previous hash value. Now, like I said, hash value is a unique attribute which is generated, and it helps in connecting the blocks. For every information that is inside the block is converted into a hash, which is a hexadecimal value based on the content of that particular information we are executing in the form of a transaction. For example, if you look at this first box, which is numbered as 1, and that is treated as a Genesis block, and this block has a hash value generated like this. because they use hash algorithm. And the first block in the blockchain will always have a 0 which is representing the previous hash value, because since this is a first block, it doesn't have any previous blocks, and that's the reason the previous hash value is shown as 0. Now, as and when the succeeding blocks are added to this blockchain, you can see the second block, which is in yellow, the second one, the previous hash value, you will see the hash value of block 1 becomes the previous hash value in block 2, and a new hash value is generated for the information what we enter in the particular block. So this logic will continue until a particular blockchain is completed. And the third block, if you see, the previous hash value is the connecting one, and the second block's hash value, which is 6BQ1, becomes the previous hash value on block 3. And a new hash value is generated for the information stored on block number 3. And a typical blockchain looks like a tabular form. Since it's a chronologically arranged and it has a sequence to be followed, so you will have the numbers being just for your easy understanding, a typical blockchain looks like this. Now, where are these blockchain applied? Now, nowadays, with the advancement in the technology and to ensure there is transparency and security, blockchain is applied in almost every area. You can see blockchain being applied in digital IDs created and bitcoins. Whenever there's a transaction on the real estate, when you have to transfer, you have to buy a piece of land, or you have to transfer the ownership of a particular house or a building. And even in the voting system, payment and transfers, then in healthcare, Internet of Things, online music, banking, finance, and even in case of law. So there is almost in all the areas or domains, you can see blockchain being applied. Even in education system. Now, let me quickly take an example of how this practical application occurs. Now, assume that you are in a classroom and you are dividing the entire class into different groups, and you have a group leader in each team. Now, assume in a particular class where Jack is considered as a team leader of that particular team, and he is assigned to collect some amount of money from the remaining team members for a specific execution of a team activity. They need to buy some items for execution of the team activity, and hence Jack is being appointed. Now, if you see, the other participants in the team consist of Bella, John, and Elsa. Now, what happens, since Jack is the team leader, Jack is assigned the job to collect individually money from Bella, John, and Elsa. Now, what happens? Bella transfers $40 to John, and she is supposed to transfer, wherein she transfers $30. John is transferring $20, and again Elsa is transferring $10 to Jack. Now, there's a chain which actually connects. So first Bella is transferring $40, and she has $40, but she is transferring only $30. So, and you can see John is transferring to Elsa. Now, this is an example of a centralized ledger. That is, only Jack knows how much money he has collected in total. And as a teacher of that particular class, I have no idea about the contribution of each individual student to the Jack. So in that way, I will not be able to know what's the individual contribution. And also I have no track of transparency. Now, you never know, that Jack might have not collected money from any one of the team members, and the other team member might have spent more. So there is no transparency and there's no clarity. And also the other team members will not know. That is, when Bella is transferring money to John and John transfers to Elsa, John and Bella do not know how much Elsa is transferring to Jack and how much money in total Jack has. So what happens in this case? So this is a typical centralized ledger where the traditional mechanism of record keeping system happens, because there is always a scope for the Jack to tamper the information. He can misuse the information, and also he can give a represent information. When blockchain technology is applied, on a decentralized and distributed format, the same information, when each individual transfers money to Jack, each student have a copy of what is the individual student's transaction to Jack, and you can see that each student will have their own copy, and you tamper. So Jack cannot misuse the information, and he cannot lie with his own team members in terms of the amount of money which is being collected from the other students. So this is a simple example how the block works on a decentralized as well as a distributed form. So everybody will have a copy. If there has to be any changes done in any one transaction, all the remaining parties have to mutually agree the changes. Only the change will be executed, and the changed transaction will get registered on another block as new transaction. So that's how we see the information. Now let's understand what blockchain. Firstly, it's a public distributed ledger. Public distributed ledger is anyone who gets into the blockchain network and has access to internet can see the information, which is very transparent. What is the transaction executed, the details of the sender, and the details of the receiver. But the identity of the receiver sender are kept confidential. You can know who are the people, what is the transaction, but you cannot see, for example, Mr. A is executing a transaction worth $10,000 to Mr. B. You can see that there's a transaction which has occurred between A and B worth 10,000. But the identity as who is A, what is his account details, and what designation he holds, what's his occupation, address, all that is kept confidential. The second is the hash encryption. So hash algorithm is being used in case of the cryptocurrencies which are used in the blockchain. And the encryption works where every time a content or an information is typed, it gets encrypted in a form of hexadecimal value, and it's a one-way encryption. You cannot decrypt the encryption. So for example, I have already sent a message stating that I have transferred 10,000 rupees worth money in the form of a document. That this information gets converted into hash. So if a cyber attacking practice is being followed and some hacker is planning to hack this particular document, he can only see the hash encryption, but he cannot decode what was the original information as such. So the transaction details of money and the other details cannot be decoded. Instead, he can only see the hexadecimal, the value which is in the form of hash. The third is the proof of work. And proof of work is a process of validating every blockchain transaction in the block. And it's a very tedious job. And it is very authentic. It is very authenticated, and it's a basically a validation process. And lastly, the mining. Mining is a process of adding block to the blockchain. Every time a new transaction is executed, it goes and gets registered onto block. And there are few experts who are trying to mine the blocks, and that process of adding the into the blockchain is called as mining. Now, what are the different types of ledgers? I just mentioned about the decentralized and the distributed one. If you look at the images, in case of distributed, you can see that these are the connecting, and looking at the color, you can see that every user has a copy of the transaction which is executed in the blockchain technology. So there's no person who's left out, and you cannot say that that person doesn't have any information. But when you look at the centralized, there is only one authorized person who has the copy of the transactions, and the other users in the network have no idea about the transparency. They do not have any knowledge about the transactions, so they face transparency. And the third type is a decentralized ledger, where in the network there are few designated persons who are considered as the authorized users who will have access, and only they have the master copies. The others in the users do not have any information about the transactions. Just to give you an example, if there is a team, or let me take an academic example, you have a college, and you can have the TQM members like principals, the HODs, vice principals, and deans in some colleges. Now you can treat these persons as few authorized persons. In case of decentralized, only these TQM members will have certain information which is confidential, which is being discussed and yet to be implemented, and has to be communicated to the staff members. So staff members do not have any idea about what is the measure or a new policy which is going to be implemented in terms of examination. But this information is being already discussed among the team TQM members, and these yellow color represents those TQM members. In case of centralized, assume that a principal is going to be changed for some reasons of a particular college, and he is already aware that he has to be resigning from his post, and there's a new person who's going to take over his place. Now this information is only available with that particular principal. No HODs, no vice principal, no staff members are aware of this information. So in that case, it becomes a centralized information of which is recorded in a ledger. And coming to distributed, when you have a particular app or a website which shares information as and when the information is being generated, let's say that a new policy is being rolled on to check the academic performance of the academicians. That is, all the faculties are going to be decided in terms of their increment in the following academic year based on their API score. Now, when there is a policy which is already devised and which is already having certain terms and conditions, and on what grounds or what are the parameters on which you will be given increment, when this information is put on black and white in the form of a document, and when that document gets distributed or is shared with all the faculty members, and that is called as distributed network, because everybody has the same information, and since the information is already shared with everyone, you cannot make any changes in the original document and claim that this is the latest policy. Now moving on, how does a transaction gets verified? In the form of proof of work. Just before that, now assume that there is a sender and he is sending a transaction message in the form of hi. Now the message or the word hi becomes the transaction message. Now when this message is entered on a block, there is a hash function. This is a standard function which is actually applied when when a miner is trying to mine a block and to generate encrypted value. So hash function SHA-256 is used, and this hi gets converted into a hash value which you can see as 93457. So now hi is converted into or encrypted into a hash value of a numerical value. So even if a hacker is trying to hack the system, he will be only able to access this hash value which is 93457. He cannot decode backwards. That is, using this hash value, he cannot try to figure out when you convert hash value into a word, what exactly is the message. So that possibility is not available. He can only see the hash value. So that's the reason it is very difficult in case of blockchain technology to tamper the documents and to erase the information. And this hash value, once it is generated, it gets further passed on through a digital signature using a signature algorithm and a private key. Now, when the information of hash value is getting decoded into another encryption, you will have private key and public key. I will come to that, what exactly is that. So there is a digital signature which gets added onto it to validate that the document was originally initiated from this center, and then it moves on to digitally signed document, and it reaches the end receiver. Now, just to help you understand with the example of what exactly is this private key and public key in context to digital signature algorithm. Now assume that almost all of us have our Gmail accounts, right? Now how Gmail is using hash algorithm. Now first assume that I do not have any Gmail account for myself, so I'm trying to create one. So there are certain options where you need to create account, and it will prompt you whether it is created for personal use or is it for a business use. And when you get into the particular portal, it will ask you to fill in your personal information, date of birth, and your gender and other details in the form of phone number. And when you finish completing, once you have decided what will be your user ID, it will ask you to confirm your password. So you will enter your password 2 times. So once it accepts, there are certain predefined rules that you need to have alphanumerical, you need to have a special character, and the length of the password has to be of a minimum letters. So those are the predefined rules which will accommodate a specific password to be created. Now assume you have selected a password and you have already created and your account is successfully created. Now what happens when you entered your user ID and you were trying to key in the password, considering that will be your future login ID and password. So the minute you key in your username and the minute you type your password, this information will immediately get converted into a hash value using hash algorithm, and it will go and sit in the Google's database. So the information what you enter gets immediately converted into a hash value, and using the hash function and the algorithm, and that gets stored into the Gmail's database. Now assume that after a month's time you're trying to log into a Gmail account. So when you key in your user ID and you're typing your password, this is you can recollect the instances where you have forgotten, probably the password is always case sensitive. You have typed by mistake all capital letters and it's not accepting, and the minute you do that it will say incorrect password. Why do you think, or how do you think the database or the Gmail is able to recognize that that's not your password? That is with the help of this hash algorithm. The first time when you entered and created your password, it got stored and registered in the Gmail's database. So every time you're trying to log into the Gmail account and you type in your user ID and password, so the immediately the password when you type in, it will try to match. So when you type the password, immediately it will get converted into a hash value, and that hash value will try to compare the previous hash value, that is whatever you created at the first time account creation. So these two hash values will be compared every time when you log in, and when your password is entered correctly, the hash value matches with the Gmail's database and it will give you the access to log into your account. And the password when you enter incorrectly, the generated hash value will not match with the already stored hash value in the database, and that's when it declines your access, and you might be prompted a forgot password and recreate, and all the other trails will start. And that's why you can see now they're trying to intensify security levels where you need to give your phone number, a recovery email. So these are the additional security levels adopted by Gmail to ensure that your access is very secure and it is only available to you. Now let's try to understand what exactly is proof of work. Like I mentioned previously, whenever the blocks are added to the blockchain, it generates a hash value based on the information stored, and the first block, which is the Genesis block, will have no previous hash. Assume there is second block consists of some confidential information in a bank, and the very own bank employee is trying to manipulate, or probably he is trying to withdraw some amount without the knowledge of the account holder as well as the banker. Now when he is trying, because he already has the information, account details are there, so he has internal software which is giving him the access. Now when he tries to access information of a particular customer and tries to withdraw money, that does not happen, that doesn't allow. Why? Because he needs, the minute he is trying to key in information, that information does not match with the succeeding. So when I try to manipulate something on block number 2 and I'm trying to change the information, probably let's say I'm trying to create a new password. The minute I key in a new password, a new hash value gets generated, which is already become a previous hash value to the succeeding block. So block number 3 already has this 6BQ1 as the previous hash. So when I make a change in block number 2, there is a new hash which gets generated, and that will not match with the third block's previous hash. So there is a mismatch. So this will immediately trigger and it will send the information to the concerned authority, and it becomes really almost impossible for a person to hack or manipulate. And how proof of work helps in ensuring the transparency and security? There are different people around the world who are trying to mine these blocks for a good reason, and they try to compete with one another to add the block to the next in the blockchain. Now there are just 3 blocks. Assume there's a fourth block which needs to be added to the third one, and the miners will try to mine the blocks with the information, and they'll have to make sure that the whenever a new information is getting registered onto a block and that block has to be added to the previous chain, there is something called as nuance value, which is actually a value which should satisfy the predefined conditions, and it has to be lesser than the target hash value. When I give a practical demo, you will be able to understand better. So proof of work will ensure the previous hash of a particular block has to match with the current second one. The transaction details have to be right, and nuance should be satisfied, and the target value hash value has to satisfy. It's a more tedious job, but it's a very strong security level. Now let's try to understand a blockchain technology architecture or a framework. There are 5 important pillars which actually support these blockchains. First is a node, that is every user in the blockchain network who's trying to access the blockchain becomes the user, and he is treated as an authorized user, and his status differs from a different type of architecture. Second is the miners. You need people who are actually experts. They try to crack the mathematical puzzle, which is based on the cryptocurrency algorithm. And if they are able to solve the mathematical puzzle, and if they are able to achieve the predefined target value, and they succeed in adding the block to the existing blockchain. So their role play a very important, and they also help in validating a particular transaction. The third aspect is the consensus. So in the blockchain technology, every person who is a user should have a mutual agreement. Once the transaction is executed, everybody has to give their approval, and only then that particular transaction is treated as valid and gets registered in the block. Going back to the same example, let's say I was mentioning about the TQM members introducing a new examination policy in an institution considering the current pandemic situation. Now assume there are 5 TQM members, and when the principal proposes this particular policy, and all the 5 members of the TQM have to give their approval digitally. It's not a manual process, it's a digital approval. And if they agree with the terms and conditions of the new policy, and when all the 5 members of the TQM gives approval, that is when the transaction is considered as a valid, and that policy comes into implementation, and later on it gets passed on to all the staff members as well as the students and their families. The fourth pillar is the transaction. Every transaction will have a unique ID in terms of sender, receiver, the transaction details, which actually automatically gets converted into a hash value. And lastly, the blocks which help a particular transaction to sequentially connect, and then it forms a blockchain. Now, how this happens, considering the same example, once the policy is implemented. Now the policy has to be communicated to the staff members. So you will have to put the information or share the information on a particular portal, or you will have to send it through WhatsApp. I'm just giving a simple example. And later it has to be communicated to the students through their email ID, or you have your own institutional app which will prompt in the form of a circular. So as and when you do these actions in terms of sharing the information in the form of a transaction, that goes and connects to the previous. So if there is a new principal who would want to see what's the examination policy, he can always go back and see there will be a trail of information. First, there will be an information in the form of a block where the principal proposes this particular policy to the TQM members. And you can see in the second block, all the TQM members giving their approval. And the third block will show the information that the policy is already communicated to the staff members. And the fourth block will show the information about the policy being shared with the student group. So this is how the blocks will help in connecting with the help of hash in the technology. Now there are different types of blockchain architecture. The commonly found is the public, private, and consortium. The new addition to this is the hybrid one. Now public architecture is where that anybody who has access to internet and who has access to the blockchain technology automatically becomes an authorized user, provided they are following certain rules and regulations of that particular framework. But in case of public architecture, there are no restrictions on the information. Everybody can see the information. Just assume your institutional website. Anybody who knows your college website can type in the URL in the URL bar and can see your whole college website. They can navigate and they can just see different types of information through different web pages. Now, some of the commonly used cryptocurrencies in case of public architecture is you have Bitcoin, you have Litecoin, and you also have Ethereum. Now, coming to the private architecture is where only one organization is the authorized controller of the network, and you have some designated authorities who are given the access. So if you have 10 people in an organization, all the 10 members of that particular organization becomes the default user in the blockchain network, but only probably a manager or a team leader will have some authorized access. So nobody else can access the information except the manager. So that's the private, where you have restricted access, and the user authorized persons are very limited. You already have a predefined users who will be treated as the access person. And private architecture you can find more commonly applied in voting system in case of digital identity, or also in case of healthcare. For example, you want to apply for, or you have to renew your passport. So only the passport, issuing authority will have the access to your information, and he will see whether all the documents are available and whether you have met, whether it is renewed much before the expiry date, and then he will approve. Now coming to the consortium time. Consortium is you have more than one organization in the blockchain network, and each organization will have their own nominated people who will be acting as the authorized user. Let's assume that this is more commonly found in banking system and in government organizations. Let's say Bank of Baroda has 5 branches in Bangalore, just a hypothetical number I'm giving. Now the head office will decide which person in each branch will be given the access as an authorized person. So let's say they nominate the branch manager, and in all the branches, the branch manager will become the authorized access person, but the information of the transactions which are occurring in the Bank of Baroda can be viewed by all the employees. But if they have to make some changes, or if they have to generate some confidential reports, that can be done only by the bank managers, because he has been assigned as the authorized person of that particular branch. Now this example holds good if there are 2 or 3 banks which are working together. Now let's say when a customer has applied for a loan with more than one bank, or the amount is shared proportionately between State Bank of India and Bank of Baroda. Now in these cases, Bank of Baroda also is treated as an authorized user, and State Bank of India also is treated as an authorized user. But there will be a nominated person who will be given the in charge or authority to access on behalf of Bank of Baroda as well as on behalf of State Bank of India. Now coming to hybrid, some of the types of cryptocurrencies used in consortium is, you have multi-coin. And in case of hybrid, this is something new which is added on to the existing structures. It's a combination of public and private, where you have a portion of information which is accessible to everybody, and some portion of information which is restricted. And the commonly used cryptocurrency in hybrid is a Dragon coin. That's the name of the cryptocurrency which is used. And the best example for this is your journal articles. Now, if you want to, refer a particular article for your research paper, and you might have seen that when you log into the websites of few quality publishers like Springler and elsewhere, Emerald and Taylor and Francis, you have some of the articles where only the abstract is visible to you. You can only go through the abstract, but you have the information in terms of what's the name of the article, who are the authors, their contact details, and what's the volume number, issue number, year, published, all the other information is there. But you have only the abstract available to you. But if you would want to see the entire paper, you do not have the open access. Now, this is a beautiful example of hybrid blockchain technology, where the viewing of the entire article is restricted, but some information, that is some basic details, are openly available to the public to view. Now, let's see how exactly this blockchain works. I've taken a very simple, analogy to help you out. First, a transaction is requested. On a block, the transaction gets registered or it gets created, and the block is sent to every node. That is, once the transaction is getting registered on a block, it is transferred to all the people or the users in the network to view and validate and approve together. And then the node validates the transaction. So once the block is received on each user's network, they will go through the transaction and each one will give their individual approval, and then node receives a reward for proof of work. So what happens once each user in the network approves the transaction? Immediately there are a group of miners who are trying to mine the information and add that to the right blockchain. And for doing the process of mining, they get a reward in terms of Bitcoin itself. And the block gets added to the existing chain, and then the transaction is treated as a complete one. Now, how before I move on to failure in banking transaction, I would like to show a demo. Is my desktop visible to all of you? My desktop is visible?
Yes.
Can somebody quickly say yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, now this is an open source blockchain demo that is the people who want to see and you want to experiment be like this. And these are already a programmed. So since it's an open source, you can type the information and convert, but you cannot execute the transaction in the form of a miner. there are certain other blockchain sources where you can create your own programming, and then you can create the whole blockchain and you can start transacting. Now, if you look at it, this is how a typical hash looks like. Like I mentioned, the hash uses SHA-256. This is the function. And if you see now, there is a block which is empty, and this represents data. And if you see, there is already, for an empty block itself, you can see there is already a hash value. Can you see here at the bottom? It is a hexadecimal value. Now let me type good afternoon. Now you might have noticed, as and when I started some information in the data, the block, you can see now the hash value has changed. Now if I erase this, you can see it's going back to its original one. So the minute I start adding information on to the data, it starts changing. And if you see, it happens just in fraction of seconds. Now, this is how a typical hash function works when you're trying to enter some information under the window of data. Now, let me show you how does this look on a block. Now, you can see on the title here. Now, I will move on to block. Now, this is how a typical block looks like. And if you see, by default, the block is numbered as 1, and you can see the nuance number. So this is a random value, which is actually helping the hash output after I type some information to match in the succeeding blocks. Now you already have a default, and since this is a first block, you can see the hash value is already, it already exists something. So now let me see. Good afternoon to everyone. The minute I type the information, you can see now the hash value is generated. Now, if I feel this is all the information I need to execute or transact, and I'm not making any changes. So because once you confirm mining, you cannot go back and make the changes. So if I feel that this is all the information I need to put on to the data aspect, then go and click on mine. Now your information is typed and hash value is ready. So this becomes like a confirmation that you are good to go with the next transaction. Now let me show you how the blockchain looks when you have a multiple blocks. Now you have another one next to the block. Click on the blockchain. The minute I type blockchain tab here, you can see now I have 3 blocks which are already visible to me. If I move scroll towards my right hand, I have succeeding blocks. Now you can see the first block is there, and you can see the nuance value. And always, if you see, the data space is there. And now if you look at the previous, now I am entering into a phase of blockchain where I'm trying to connect to different or multiple blocks. This is what I was mentioning in my PPT. Since this is the first block, which is the Genesis block, it does not have any previous hash value. So it will always be a 0. Now let me type the same message over here. So good afternoon, that's it. I will click on mine. So this first block is registered on the blockchain, and you cannot tamper the data. Now, since this is a demo, I can make changes here, but on the reality, you cannot make changes. Now, if you see, the first block has already generated a hash value we at the bottom. Now I will move to the second block. And now if you see, my nuance value in block number 1 is 7584. But when it comes to the second block, it is 35230, right? Once I mine the block, once I finish entering the information on block number 2, and if I click on mine, the nuance number, whatever is the current number, will change to another number, which is definitely a lesser value of 7584. Now let me say, hope the session is going good. Now, once I finish typing the information, I will click on mine. Now, if you see, it's finished mining, but if you look at it, you have the previous value, which is the same if you see, the sequence of the alphabets and the numbers is the same as #1. So it will be exactly the same. Now, when I change the information, just going good, you know, and mine, again, you can see here, it is not changing. The previous hash value, even after I made change to the content, the new hash value of block 2 has changed. But the previous hash value of the block 2, which when I compare with hash value of block 1, is not changing. So this is how it is more secure. Though I'm trying to change the information, I cannot change the digital data. Now, once I do, now I have finished mining it, I will just quickly go to the third block and it continues. So if you look at it, now the nuance value is not less than 7584. Now this block 2 gets added to block number 1 only when this nuance value is less than 7584. And to do this, the miners in the across the world, they try to compete using in order to make sure that my nuance value of block 2 is lesser than block 1, I need to crack a mathematical puzzle in real blockchain technology platform. And that can be done only by few experts when they are mining the block. The minute I crack that mathematical puzzle, definitely my nuance value will be lesser than block 1's nuance value. And then this block 2 gets added on to block 1. So that's how the sequence start working. So similarly, when I start moving on to block number 3, it again follows the same logic. Now you can see the hash value of block 2 becomes the previous hash value on block number 3. So this is how the blocks get added to one another with the help of hash algorithm, and they help in connecting individual blocks and to form a blockchain with more foolproof and secure way. Now, coming back to which I was mentioning as the basic outline of blockchain. Now, let me explain and share the information how the banking structure and other financial markets or financial sector uses this particular blockchain technology. Now, have you ever wondered why does a banking transaction fail in reality? Let me quote an example. You're trying to transfer money to your parent, and all of a sudden the transaction is denied and they do not receive the amount credited in their account. There are multiple reasons why a banking transaction can fail, but the most commonly found are these are the standard ones. Either you have a technical issue, whether it could be a scenario where the server of that particular bank is down, or you do not have good quality internet connectivity, or the ID and password do not match. There are login credentials doesn't match. There could be many more reasons in terms of technical issues. And the bank is considered as an important factor for any economic upliftment of a country. If a bank fails, the whole economy fails, because bank acts as a center pillar in uplifting the economy of any country. Now, the second reason could be your account could have been hacked by some hacker somewhere in the world, and that's why you are not able to execute your transaction. The third could be the transfer limit. There are some limits assigned when you're trying to transfer the money. If you're looking at RTGS, NEFT, IMPS, you have its own restrictions and limitations. And the fourth factor is the high transfer charges. I think this is one common factor which all of us will agree to it. When you try to transfer money through a digital banking option, you always end up paying some transaction fees for the amount what you're transferring. Either some banks charge it on a monthly basis and some charge as and when the transaction is executed. It depends on the rules and regulations of every bank. Now, let me help you with an example. Now, these are some of the common challenges, what you can see, which is rooted through the failure in banking transaction. The first, high transaction fee. If you see, if Mr. A is trying to send, actually, if this sender is supposed to send only $195 to this lady, but if he is adopting a net banking option, the bank is charging him $5 as a banking charges, that is a transaction fee. So when this man is trying to send the money, he ends up including that $5 also, and the total $200 gets deducted from his account rather than the actual amount, which is $195. So the amount total which gets deducted is inclusive of transaction fee. This is just a simple example when the quantum of money is less. Imagine what will be the transaction fee which gets added on to the actual deduction if the quantum of money to be sent is really high. If instead of $195, if that person has to transfer, let's say $2 lakh, then the amount of transaction fee also will increase. Now that's again a challenge. Second is a double spending. Now, double spending is more commonly found in case of digital transaction, especially in case of businesses where people have an option for current account. That is, they have an option of overdraft facility where they can spend more than what is actually available as their balance in their account. Now, that is again creating a problem. Now, once you have an overdraft, you have withdrawn or you have transacted more money than what you have, you need to refill that amount by transferring the difference amount to your account. Otherwise, there will be a charges which gets applied onto the account if you do not balance it. For example, this lady has to transfer only 500. She needs to buy some commodity. So she has 800. So that means she has sufficient balance in her account. But is because this overdraft facility is allowed on digital banking, she will end up buying another commodity from another e-commerce website and she will spend 1,000. But actually she has only 800. So there is addition 200 which is accommodated with the digital banking option, and she needs to make sure after she has sufficient money or within the stipulated time, she need to contribute or deposit that 200 rupees back to her account to make sure that she has balanced that overdraft. Otherwise, if she's not doing that, the bank will start charging. Another simple example would be your credit. I'm sure most of you have credit cards. So when you delay your payment within the stipulated cycle of payment, it will start charging interest on your payment, right? So that's how exactly the double spending also works. And the third common reason is the hacking, where people try to hack and they want to, take away the money, or it could be a lot of fraudulent practices you are coming across, hacking an account, mimicking the card and cloning it and taking it away in the ATM cards as well. Now, how blockchain can solve this problem? So if you look at the examples, the whole, the crux is in digital payments. Now, how blockchain comes to the help? Now, in case of blockchain, you will be using Bitcoin instead of your actual currency. So you will be seeing that either there will be no transaction fee or a low transaction fee. Now, the same example, if you take, the person here has to transfer 195, right? So in this case, if he is transferring $200, he is just getting only $1 deducted from his account out of the 200. So actually the person receives more in case if that's the amount he need to transfer. Otherwise, the receiver will receive lesser amount and your amount will start getting deducted from your account. Now, there is a benefit. And public ledger, since the information is publicly available to everybody, the hacking is almost impossible. And the third option is the verification of transactions. So let's say how verification of transaction works is, if I have 10 Bitcoins, I have used the first Bitcoin to purchase a product from Amazon. Now, when I use the same Bitcoin to purchase another product from Flipkart, there is already an ID which is associated, and we have discussed about the proof of work. So the registered transaction will automatically deny my second transaction because I'm using the same Bitcoin. because one Bitcoin can be used only for one particular transaction. So in that way, the transactions gets verified, it gets digitally documented, and it will also prevent from anti-money laundering and other fraudulent practices. Oh, I'm sorry, the demo should have been little later, but I think you already have an idea about it. Now, having understood the outline of blockchain and other aspects, I would like to directly get into the case study. This is more applicable, and it's being tested in some of the investment banks. How blockchain can help investment banking operations. So I have taken this as a case study. Now, even before we understand the practical application, I would like to discuss few basic concepts related to investment banking, so that when I explain the application of blockchain, you will be able to understand and connect the aspects. Now, entire banks, you can see public sector, private banks, foreign banks, all these banks fall under three major segments. So the overall banking can be categorized into three different segments. First is the commercial bank. All of you are aware of it. You are seeing a lot of banks which are into corporate banking, and also banks providing services to government organizations. So that's more into business oriented. So that's coming under commercial banking. The second segment is the retail banking, where the banking services are provided to individual people like you and me. And the third segment is the investment banking, which is more crucial when compared to commercial and retail. So the banking segments are classified into three categories. Now, coming to what exactly is investment banking. Now, investment banks refers to a financial institution who help in capital formation and also provide financial and non-financial advisory services, so that the clients who are high net worth individuals, it can be government organizations, it can be the central banks of different countries, to manage their assets and also deal with wealth. So basically, it's a financial institution who is into wealth management and asset management of different clients. They help in capital formation and providing services. Now, the investment banking, the operations are divided into two major categories. One is the buy side and the second is the sell side. Now, buy side type of investment banking provide only financial advisory services in buying securities. Now, you can see these are the two major types. So if ABC is an investment bank, and if they are part of buy side, they provide financial advisory services to their clients, helping them what are the securities they should be buying and what is that best time to buy, and how do they decide which security has to be purchased. Whereas coming to the sell side type of investment banking, they provide selling, that is, they help in assisting or act as an intermediary in selling the securities of different clients, and also act as an intermediary between the issuers and the investors. You might have come across the initial public offerings. So whenever those financial transactions happen in the financial market, these investment banks act as an intermediary or help in IPO, and they act as a bridge between the investors and the company which is issuing IPO, public placements, and other financial transactions. Now, the entire global investment banking operations. The first is the front office, which actually represents a direct interaction between the bank employees and the clients who are willing to take the banking services. And it involves more of customer interaction and creating new business. So this is one of the most important aspects in banking operation, which generates maximum revenue to the bank, because once the bank staff succeed in bringing more business to the bank by attracting more customers to avail the banking services, they end up generating more revenue. And the second component is the middle office. Now, middle office in context to investment banking is more confined to managing trade confirmations, trade settlements, and there are different corporate actions. I will not be getting more detail into it because it's again a whole concept into it. Now, anything to facilitate between the middle office and the back office, the middle office banking employee come into picture, and they are involved in the settlement process. And the third component is the back office. It is not seen or visible to most of the clients or the customers, but it acts as a backbone because it supports both front and middle office operations through reconciliations and client engagement. Example of Yes Bank. You have a front desk employees who are always ready to help you in creating account. If you are waiting for loan, you have people who will help you in documentation process. So there is a back-end team which is actually into reconciliation. They only deal with the systems and they deal with the softwares of the particular bank, and they keep track of the transactions. So they have individual account of every customer, and they generate important reports, and finally all the summary reports are sent to different authorized person at different teams in the bank. They do not come into the direct contact with the customers. Now, on basis of this, how blockchain has helped in revamping the whole operational sector segment in investment bank. Now you have different players in investment banks. Players are nothing but the different participants. You have clients who are the customers. You have a custodian. It's again another investment bank which acts as a physical custodian to hold physical cash and your stock. If you are an investor and if you are involving yourself in trading, your physical cash and the stock or the share certificate documents will be physically held with these custodian. And the third is the brokerage firms. That is, these are the firms who act as an intermediary or middleman in executing trade. They are authorized and approved by SEBI in context to India. And every country has its own regulatory body in context to financial markets who will give permission as who will be the authorized broker. So if I'm an individual and I want to trade in a stock market, I cannot do it directly myself. Instead, I need to go through an authorized broker who is registered under the SEBI, and he will help me in executing my trade, and I'll have to pay some brokerage fee to him, depending on the quantum of my trade. Next is the clearing house. Clearing house act as a depository where they collect from the buyer and the seller. That is, if I am trading from the buyer, they might collect the cash, and from the seller, they might collect the share certificate as one central authority, and they help in dispatching it to the concerned persons. Next is the financial markets. Financial markets, again, you have primary, secondary market, and these markets will help you in trading. Then there are software firms who actually create the softwares, and they develop a customized software suiting the requirement of each bank according to its business operations. You have regulatory bodies like you have RBI, you have SEBI, and you have other regulatory bodies, government, there could be associations. And if you're dealing with foreign exchange, you have FERA, FEMA. So you have so many regulatory bodies. And then you have lastly the financial institutions or the banks. So these are the major participants in investment bank. What exactly happens in an investment banking cycle? It has 5 major steps or a cycle involved. First stage is the client consultation. If I have, let's say, 10 lakh worth of money, I will choose investment bank. Some of the examples of investment banks to name is, you have heard of Citibank, you have maybe JP Morgan, you have Goldman Sachs, you have Wells Fargo, you have State Street, you have Northern Trust, you have Society Generale, and you have Boni Mellon, that's Bank of New York Mellon, and many more. And some of the Indian in some of the Indian banks which offer investment banking services are like, you have Yes Bank, you have State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, you have Punjab National Banks. They are also into investment banking services. So in case of client consultation, what happens is The first, I'm a client, I have money, so I do not know where to invest and how to invest. So I approach, let's say, State Bank of India. You will have a designated front office employee who will be directly interacting with me, and he will provide me an advisory service as how I can distribute that 10 lakh into different securities. Instead of investing just in shares, probably he will suggest me to invest 20% on bonds, another 20% on equity shares, and some percentage, let's say another 20% on mutual funds, and remaining 20% on, let's say, national pension scheme. So client consultation is the first stage. The second stage is the inception. That is, once I am happy with the advisory services, I will involve myself with the documentation process and I will be on board. I become a registered client with the bank. Then comes the portfolio activation. Portfolio activation is they will create a portfolio based on my proportion of investment. They will create a portfolio depending on the securities they have purchased with the money I have given, and a name will be given to the portfolio which will be identified and associated with my name. So every time they would want to check the reports, it becomes easier, and a ID will be assigned to the client. And finally, the fourth stage is a end-to-end reconciliation. Once the portfolio is created, it will be traded on the stock market. And once you start trading, there are different strategies which are applied, active and passive. So depending on what type of strategy you would want to, your portfolio will be started to compare with the market index. For example, let's say ABC is a portfolio created for me exclusively by State Bank of India. They will ask me on which stock exchange do I want to trade. I will choose probably the National Stock Exchange, and I don't want Bombay Stock Exchange. Now, National Stock Exchange has its own index. Like you have, you have Nifty. That's the index which is used. That's the market index of National Stock Exchange, and my ABC will be compared with the Nifty, and the calculation will happen. The transactions will take place. Daily reconciliation in terms of how much cash I hold, how many shares I hold, if cash in what are different currencies, and to what extent. All that will be reconciled on a particular tool, which is again a software by the backend office. So client stage 1, 2, and 3 will be done by front office. Stage 4 will be done by 4 and 5 will be done by the back office. Middle office will help in connecting all these 5 stages together. And once the reconciliation is done, there has to be a periodical reports which will have to be sent to the client based on how their portfolio is performed. So these are the 5 stages involved in investment banking cycle. Now, this is a practical example as how blockchain has helped in overcoming various challenges in front office. First is the front office workflow. If you look at it, this image, what you can see is before applying blockchain into it. So in case of clients in the front office workflow, first client will approach an investment bank. They will submit all their documents, which is a KYC, know your customer. All the documents will be verified. And how do they verify is every investment bank will have their own database, which will be connected to other regulatory body databases so that they can match the information and confirm the validity of the customers. And once it is approved, if the documents seems to be original and fine, then the client is approved as an authorized customer, and the seeding will happen. That is, once the client is accepted to be their customer, client will start giving money to the investment bank to manage his money on behalf of the client. That is when the documents match. That is, the authenticity is matched. Assume the documents provided by this client is not matching. give me an example. I have given my PAN card, which is a manipulated one. It's not a valid PAN card. The photo is something, the number is something, and the address given is something. Aadhaar card is the best example. Let's take Aadhaar card. But when they try to check the database from the Aadhaar card portal. Aadhaar portal, they try to see the number given as the Aadhaar number is showing somebody else's picture and the address is something different. When those kind of instances happen, when they verify the documents on the database, automatically there will be a decline of this client and the client will be rejected. They will not take the client further and no money will be also taken from the client for further proceedings. When the whole process, it involves a lot of manual requirement as a resources, and it's a very time consuming process as well. But when the same information after applying blockchain, in case if it's applied, how does it look? Now, in case of blockchain, client will contact the investment bank and he will submit all the documents. Blockchain will do the verification automatically, taking different databases, and if the information is proved to be right and correct, automatically from the client account, the money will get credited directly to the investment bank's account. So directly there is a seeding. You do not have a manual process of checking, going into the database, manually verifying the documents, parameters, all that is erased, and automatically the amount gets credited to the investment bank's account and the amount gets debited from the client account in case if blockchain is applied in front office. Similarly, coming to the settlement process, which is a middle office function here. Now, before blockchain is applied, it looks more complicated, but I will make it more simple. Now, assume there is a buy-side fund manager, that is you have instructed, you have reached out to State Bank of India and you want to buy some shares from Infosys. Now a representative from the State Bank of India becomes the buy side fund manager. He will get in contact with one of the investment banks saying that my client is looking for purchasing 100 Infosys shares. Now this person will have to contact the brokerage firm. That is, the investment bank will get in touch with some authorized broker, which can be an individual or it can be again another investment bank. They will look for the people who are willing to sell the Infosys shares. So they will start matching the details and they will identify that there is a sell side fund manager who is willing to sell 100 Infosys shares. Now here both the demand and supply is met through an intermediary who's a brokerage firm here. Now once these two are brought together with the help of this brokerage firm, the transaction will be executed on the financial market, that is the stock market. And now what happens once the transaction is executed? Now buy side manager has to receive the shares in the form of a certificate, whereas the sell side manager has to receive the cash from the buy side. So now what happens? Now buy side manager is having an account with an investment bank. Now once the transaction is executed, investment bank of buy side manager has to transact the cash. Now it has to send a transaction by transferring that much amount of cash to a clearing house. Now here clearing house is a depository where this investment bank deposits a number of 100, let's say one share is equal to 1 rupee. So 100 share is equivalent to 100 rupees. So this investment bank of buy side will deposit 100 rupees cash to the clearing house by transferring the money to the clearing house's account. Similarly, the sell side fund manager has to deposit or transfer 100 shares certificate with the clearing house. So in this case, what happens is the buy side manager outflow is the cash and inflow is the stock certificate which comes from the clearing house. For sell side, outflow is the stock certificate and the inflow is the cash. Now, the clearing house, once it receives the stock and shares from the concerned party, it will try to validate the information and it will check, and then the transaction, any trade, especially in bond, if you look at it, the settlement date is T+3. That is trade date plus 3 days. If today I am executing my trade, I am buying shares, 100 shares from Infosys. So today is 24, 25, 26, 27th. So 27th will be the settle date. So until 27th, the buy side manager will not receive the Infosys shares, and also the sell side manager will not receive the cash. So they need to wait for almost 4 days for the transaction to impact their respective accounting systems. Now, if blockchain is implemented in this scenario, you will see the intermediates in the form of brokerage firm and clearing house are removed. They no longer come into the picture. Instead, the buy side manager and sell side fund manager with their respective investment banks can directly deal with the stocks exchange through their demat account, and automatically once the transaction is executed, the amount gets transferred and the stock or the shares is received by the respective managers of the transaction. So immediately it gets reflected. And how do they do is, how can this transaction be immediately executed into the respective accounts or after the terms and conditions are met, is with the help of a smart contract. So smart contract will help these financial transactions which has certain terms and conditions to be applied automatically through a blockchain technology. I will explain that little time later. You can see now in this case the intermediary are being removed. Similarly, when coming to back office process, you can see this is a tedious job again before the implementation of blockchain. You can see once the portfolio gets activated through the investment bank, they have this KYC process. They will start trading, and the transactions, that is how many stocks are traded, the cash inflow and outflow of the shares, all that is reconciled on a reconciliation tool, which is again through computer system using specific software. Now, custodian is the physical holder of stock and cash, who will have their own accounting system which is entered in, maintained in their database. So when the transactions of accounting appears on the reconciliation tools, it comes from the investment bank database as well as the custodian's database. So what happens here? The custodian always makes sure his accounting database is maintained on actual basis. That is, until I get physical transaction or cash in my hand, I do not consider as the transaction completed. Whereas investment banking side, they work on the contractual basis. That is, if I have entered into a trade agreement today, I will assume the trade is executed from my end today itself. Now here itself you can see there is a discrepancy, because of which the transactions on reconciliation doesn't match, and when they try to reconcile the cash position and the stock position between the custodian and the investment bank, they see a difference. Then once these two reconciliation are performed, it moves on to the next reconciliation, that is the net asset value. That is, this client has how much net, what is his total securities net value in the market, and that will be approved by the portfolio admin team, and they will validate and they will send an approval, which will then further move on to a performance measurement application tool, and the employees over there will start measuring whether your portfolio is doing better than the market index, example Nifty, or is it underperforming, outperforming, or is it exactly matching the index. So that calculation will be done, and finally a client reporting will be generated and a report will be sent to the clients at the end. Now if you see, there is a whole tedious process. When blockchain is applied in this context, you can see after the fund is seeded and the transactions will appear, you can see the clearinghouse also plays a picture here from a custodian and investment banking, portfolio administration, client, and the portfolio measurement team. All these parties will be, including financial market, will be in one blockchain network. As and when the transaction gets executed on the stock exchange, the information will be passed on to all the parties at the same time, and they will see the reflection of the transactions on their accounts instantly, and also the clients can generate their report immediately. You can see the report just passes on with less time, though the clients have access to their reports instantly. A formality has to be completed by the investment banking by sending a report officially, but they will have a copy, so they can see the clients in this case need not wait for the entire process to complete to see how their money is being utilized by these investment banks, whether they are effectively using it or is it underutilized, overutilized. All these reflections can be seen instantly, and they can take decisions accordingly. So this is how the blockchain has solved problems at different operational segments in an investment bank. Now, I mentioned about the smart contract, right? How these transactions can be instantly seen and in each party's networking system. Traditional contract, if you look at it, you have two parties who are entering into a contract. They have a physical document which has to be typed, printed on a stamp paper, and it has to be duly signed, and each copy has to be given to the party. For all this process, you see a third party which is involved between these two people. And then there is an execution of the contract. But when the blockchain is applied in the form of a smart contract, how you can see the transformation, I would like to explain that with an example. Let me take an insurance example. Assume Mr. A is working as a software engineer in ABC company. He has a family which involves a wife and a son. He takes a term life insurance policy worth 10 lakhs for 15 years by paying a monthly per annum of 5,000. So he has a premium every year 5,000 he needs to pay to an insurance policy company. Let's assume here it is LIC. LIC is the company from which he has taken a policy. Now he has invested 10 lakhs for 15 years, and his wife is the nominee in the policy. In this case, he has nominated his wife to be the nominee in case if he dies before the 15 years. Since it's a term life insurance policy, in case if he dies before 15 years, she will be eligible to receive that 10 lakhs worth of money. Now, situation is that there is an accident. He meets with a road accident and he dies on the spot. Now, in case of a traditional concept, how the wife can avail the claim money, let's have a look at it. In case of traditional way or a manual process, first the nominee has to inform the life insurer, that is the company, in this case it's LIC, on the death of the policy holder. She needs to go to the LIC submitting the death certificate of her husband and other ID proof, address proof, and other documents have to be submitted, wherein first she needs to inform them, and then she needs to submit the required documents. They will have their own claim team which will try to validate and verify whether the documents submitted and the terms in the policy are matching. Everything they will try to check, and then they try to assess the claim, and finally if all the information provided seems to be correct and right, then they will make the payment by their side to the nominee. Now this whole process might take weeks, months, you never know, depending on the speed of the company. Now the same problem can be solved if blockchain is applied. In case of a blockchain, there is a smart contract which is created. Basically, the information in the form of what are the terms and conditions those information will be put it on to a hash algorithm. They will generate the hash value. The terms and conditions are converted into a block. So there is a predefined contract which has the terms and conditions, and all the parties will get one copy of the digital contract. And once the and now since there is a predefined terms, in this case you can see the term is 15 years. If he dies before that, then the amount has to be transferred, wherein it will be, these contracts will be linked to all the databases from which it will start fetching the information. Second is, if you see, the event will trigger the contract execution. So how the contract will, or the technology will know it has to execute the transaction is, once the trigger of the event is identified, it will pass on to the company. And that is how, what will happen is, as soon as the person dies, there will be a database from which the death certificate will be shared on the blockchain network, and the company will get a trigger telling that this person has died, and immediately the contract will automatically execute itself by depositing the claim money to the nominee's account, and the company's account it will get debited, and they will get the relevant documents. Automatically it happens, and finally you can see the amount being settled instantly. So immediately, the process which could take weeks or months time can happen in just fraction of few minutes. And these smart contracts are basically designed with two standard programming language. One is the Solidity and second is the Serpent. And the most commonly used is the Solidity one, which is run on the programs using EVM, that is the electronic virtual machine. And they create a program and they develop this contract with the terms and conditions, and all the people in the blockchain network will get a copy or digital copy of this contract, which is duly digitally signed by the company, and then the execution happens at the trigger of the event. Same thing, same logic applies when a customer is trying to apply for a loan with the bank. All the documents, CIBIL score will be checked. I'm sure you have come across this term. So automatically his CIBIL score will be checked based on his previous outstanding loans, current loans, and based on his salary certificates. There are a whole lot of documents which is accessed from different database, which will figure out whether he is eligible for loan or not, and if yes, what should be his equated monthly installments to be decided. All this happens automatically with the help of blockchain. Similarly, you can see even in healthcare, checking the medical history of the patients, trying to find organ donor, or if there is a blood requirement, you have a whole lot of things. And also in the process of voting, you can prevent rigging and non-authorized person trying to vote on behalf of someone else. So all these areas, and it's more prominently used even in supply chain management, logistics management, healthcare, education sector as well. So you have the applications of blockchain in various domains in today's world. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. And before I wind up, I would like to show you a small piece of information which will be really helpful for all of you. Now you can see this is a little more interested in trying to figure out how exactly things work. This is my Google Scholar post. You can see these are some of the articles which I have published, and you can see cited. When you click on that particular link, it will take you to the article. And if you are interested, you can see how artificial intelligence works in recruitment and investment banking, blockchain. There are a lot of information you can find in this, and this will help you to get some more information. Not only my articles, you can get in touch with any of the quality articles today using various references databases. So I would like to thank the organizing committee and all the participants for having patience and bearing me throughout the presentation. Thank you very much. And now I'm open to questions.
Is there any questions to Madam?
Either I have explained everything very easily, or not much has gone into the, you know. Just a few leads which I would like to share with the participants. This is really a very good platform, and those who are into academic research, you can try using this platform and see how this can be applied in various domains. If you are working in a company, or probably you want to see if you're in management, commerce, you can see blockchain has a lot of scope for future applications in terms of practicality testing, since we all belong to social science. And people who are under the technical aspect, you always have an experiment to observe when it comes to applied research. But when it comes to exploratory and descriptive research, we have our own limitations. So you can see how it can be applied in insurance sector. You can look for a paper, you can do an experiment, and see how does it work. I have a question here. Have all the banks in India applied blockchain technology? The answer is no. Right now, in the global context, if you look at it, Citibank, JP Morgan, then Bank of New York Mellon, and Goldman Sachs. These are the banks which have developed their own cryptocurrencies. They, like Bitcoin, they have created and developed their own cryptocurrencies, and they are already transacting that. But Indian banks have not yet started that. One drawback with Indian banking is we are into back office operations because of our volatile market structure, and the sentiments of investors, and strict regulations from RBI and SEBI, and also looking at our economy. And also, one of the reasons is India is a developing nation. So compared to other developed nations, India is only involved in back office operations when it comes to investment banking. So we have still more lot to achieve in context to front office and middle office operations. And but they have started applying artificial intelligence. Definitely they have applied in their banking system, especially our Indian banks. You can see Canara Bank has done, Yes Bank, lot of nationalized and private banks have done it. The minute you log on to their website, you get to see a chatbot which automatically pops up at the left or the right corner, and it will say, I am Ria Sia. And they have already a program which is predefined, that is predefined F and frequently asked questions. They have questions and solutions which is already programmed and loaded to the chatbot. So when I, as a customer, type some basic information like how do I download my loan EMI payment, so it already has an answer to it, and it will guide me through that. So I can download the information automatically without any human intervention. So that's the answer. Next question.
Regarding Bitcoin.
Yes, sir. Yes. I think Bitcoins is still in infancy stage in India. Like I said, our regulations are very strong when it comes to other advanced and developed country. We are not that very open because we have our own reservations in terms of banking system. That's one of the reasons. If you recollect, in 2008, when there was a financial crunch across the globe just because of one company, and it collapsed the entire global financial markets. India was one of the least affected nations. Why? Because of our RBI strict regulation, and SEBI is improvising day by day. So it is right now it is prohibited because there's no source to track. If I'm transacting through Bitcoin in India, if I'm trying to look for some information, there's no source. You have information that Veda has transacted, but there's no source that from where did I get that much money, and to whom I am sending, and for what reason I'm sending. So all that details are still unexplored. So it is still prohibited. I'm sure they will try to figure out some regulatory framework based on which they will try to implement it in near future. And it reminds me one more incident which really happened in one of the investment banks, that's Wells Fargo. It's launched in India a few years ago. Earlier, it's again a US based bank. I know it's very, it could be funny that all these incidents happen through the US country. Even the Lehman Brothers, which were the main source of collapsing the financial market in 2008, which all of you called recession. Wells Fargo, it did something very bad. Now, when the clients have deposited their money with the investment bank, what happens is they are investing, and those clients of investment banks cannot be you and me like an individual person. It can be a government organization, a very high net worth individual, like in case Ambani's, Tata, Birla, those kind of individuals, and the central bank of other country. So our RBI has invested some portfolios with State Bank of, in State Street Global Advisors. That's the US again, Boston-based company. And they have invested in a portfolio which is again managed by State Street. And luckily, when I was working, I got to see the management, how the portfolio and other thing. So what happens when you invest your money as a client? You have an option to deal your investment in multiple currencies. So I can invest my money in US dollars, some in dinars, and some in GBP, that's UK's pound and euros. But what happens when I'm investing, when I'm buying securities from those countries' stock exchange? I have a 10 securities. So I pick one security from New York, one from Europe, and one from Australian stock exchange. So I'm dealing with multiple currencies. So what happens, I am a customer from India. So my domicile country is India. So which means Indian rupees. At the end of the day, whatever is my money I'm generating, it has to be deposited back to my account in Indian rupees. So there is a foreign exchange conversion which happens. So when in this process, there is a fluctuation in the exchange rates. So I tend to either lose out some money or earn some more money on every transaction I make from my security. What happened? So what they do is these investment banks give an option for overdraft facility. That is, my portfolio manager can continue trading even though I don't have enough money, because he is predicting that I will make some I will sell my share and make some money. So there's a provision for that. And with this, I either end up with more or less currencies. What did this Wells Fargo did was they created a dummy accounts of the real clients. So there were few portfolio managers who were involved, and a very top official of that particular company or a bank. They all came as one team, and they had this modus operandi where they picked a few top clients and they created a dummy accounts in the name of the same clients but with a different name, and they started slowly transferring the money from the real client's account to a dummy client account. And over a period of time, when they generate this overdraft report on a monthly basis, they get to see in each currency how much they're due to the bank, and they try to balance off. So what happens after a period of time, this happened for quite a big time, I think for almost 6 to 8 months. The client didn't know that their money was slowly transferred in a small bits. Finally, some of the clients got a triggering. They realized that they are not having sufficient money in their account and it is getting overdrawn. And bank is repeatedly asking them to refill the money with the required currencies. Then they started doing some introspection and they figured out and they identified it was all because of the company, the bank itself. And that became a big issue, and there were a lot of legal actions taken, and it actually crashed the reputation of that bank. And now the people, I don't know what happened, whether they got terminated or a lot of things come to picture. When it's a company, I think than profits, the goodwill of a company is always that will help in the longer run. So that's another incident. So all this can be curbed when they apply this blockchain technology.